You type a domain name into your browser, hit enter, and like magic, you're instantly whisked away to a website. It seems so simple, right? It really does. But what if I told you that behind that seemingly straightforward process lies this, a labyrinth of global rules, technical standards, and even hidden security threats? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into exactly that. The fascinating complex world of internationalized domain names, or IDNs. Right. These are the domain names that use non-ASCII characters, allowing the internet to truly go global. Okay, so our mission today is pretty ambitious. We're going to pull back the curtain on how a domain name truly gets its identity. Yeah. We'll explore the hidden layers of governance, the tech underneath, understand how all this impacts everything from linguistic accessibility online to the very security of your digital life. And crucially, we'll look at why a new AI domain polyglot benchmark is shaping up to be a really critical test for the future of trustworthy AI. Get ready for some surprising facts and, hopefully, a whole lot of aha moments about the digital world you interact with every day. Definitely. And maybe to start, let's unpack a really fundamental concept. It hints at this complexity. The difference between a U label and an A label. So, an internationalized domain name like ASCII.com, that's designed to be human readable. That's its U label. Right, what you see. Exactly. But the underlying DNS infrastructure, the very foundation of the internet, it was built on ASCII characters. It needs a translated version. It's called an A label. Okay, machine language basically. Pretty much. So for that ASCII.com, that A label would be XLGL-JE35CA2Chain74GC.com. Whoa. Yeah, and that XN prefix, that's the signal. It tells the system, hey, this is an encoded string. So it's like a dual identity then, the human-friendly face and the machine-readable code hiding behind it. Precisely. We actually call this a leaky abstraction. Leaky abstraction? Yeah, because the technical plumbing, that ASCII translation, it still leaks through into what's supposed to be a purely human-friendly experience. It's kind of a constant reminder of the ASCII-first internet, and it's just one sign of the deep complexity an AI needs to understand to really master this space. So that's our fundamental building block, the visible versus the technical. But understanding how these work is just, well, the tip of the iceberg, right? Oh, yeah. Because governing them is a surprisingly intricate system. Let's really unpack this complexity by looking at what we're calling the tripartite foundation of domain name rules. Right. It's effectively a stack of layers, each adding more nuance and frankly, more surprising facts. The first layer is the technical baseline, set by the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. Right. As many of you know, the Internet's bedrock was ASCII. So, to globalize that, Punycode was invented. It translates Unicode characters into an ASCII-compatible format that the DNS could understand. Punycode, yeah, heard of it. But while you've likely heard of Punycode, that clever solution, what's often overlooked are the specific, crucial standards involved. Think of them as the Internet's bedrock engineering blueprints. Okay. Like IDN 2008, that defines the entire framework and operations. This includes RFC 5892, which meticulously assigns properties like p-valid, meaning permitted or disallowed to every single Unicode character. It's incredibly detailed. Wow. So beyond just the basic Unicode rules, are there even more specific complexities for certain languages, maybe? What kind of challenges do those present? Absolutely. Take the multi-part BD rule, that's from RFC 5893. It's specifically designed for right-to-left languages like Arabic or Hebrew. Okay, so how does that work? Well, this isn't just about display, it actually dictates specific character order. And it even prohibits mixing European and Arabic Indic numerals within a single label. Really? So you can't mix number types? Not within the same label, no. It's a very strict procedural validation rule, and it's all about maintaining proper text flow and, crucially, avoiding confusion. Wow, that's a lot more granular than I would have imagined for something that seems so simple on the surface. Okay, so those are the technical underpinnings. The second layer introduces the governance guardrails. And that's where ICANN comes in, right? The Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. Yeah, ICANN. And what's truly insightful about their role isn't just their mission, to unify the Internet and make it multilingual through IDNs. It's how their seemingly small rules can directly prevent massive issues. Like what? Well, for example, their IDN implementation guidelines version 4.1 becomes fully effective by April 30, 2025. By the way, they're designed specifically to, quote, minimize the risk of cyber squatting and consumer confusion. Okay, makes sense. And these guidelines, they explicitly forbid constructions like hyphens in both the third and fourth positions. Like abcd.com. That's a no-go. Huh. Seems like a tiny detail. It does, but it shows just how nuanced global internet governance has to be. Those double hyphens in positions 3 and 4 are reserved specifically to signal the start of a puny code label, the X and AMP, T. Ah, okay, so it avoids conflicts, got it. Exactly. And then the final layer. This is where things get truly nuanced, you said? The TLD-specific registry rules. That's right. This is where the rubber meets the road. And where the rules aren't monolithic at all. Not at all. So the crucial question then becomes, who actually gets the last word? Yeah. And it's the individual top-level domain registries. Like VeriSign for .com. Exactly. VeriSign for .com, DEC for, and so on. They often implement rules that are even stricter than what IETF or ICANN mandate, and their rules take final precedence. So the definitive answer for whether a domain is okay isn't universal. Nope. It's always TLD dependent, always. Okay, can you give us some concrete examples? How do these TLD registries differ in practice? Let's take VeriSign first. Okay, VeriSignManaging.com and .net. They take a very security-first, conservative approach. Right. For instance, the Greek letter beta, it's actually P violated under the IETF standards. It's allowed technically. Why? But test.com would be rejected by VeriSign because their policy prohibits commingling Latin and Greek scripts within a single label. They want to keep scripts separate within one part of the domain name. Ah, okay. So no mixing scripts in one label. Right. Similarly, something like a.com, mixing Latin air and hand character, rejected for the same script mixing rule. And what about really short domains, like just one character? Yeah, single character domains like d.com, generally reserved by VeriSign, not available to the public. They keep things tight. Okay, so VeriSign sounds like it prioritizes security, maybe over linguistic flexibility. What about DN for Germany's registry? Different philosophy. They absolutely do. DN is much more linguistically accommodating, specifically for Germany. They allow 93 additional special characters. Like what? Including German, louts obviously, but also notably the ASCII. The sharp S exactly. Now, following IDNA 2008, AIM became a distinct character, not just equivalent to S, and DN permits its registration. So wait, does that mean strasse.de and stra.de are two different domains? Yes. They are completely separate domains under DDE. Wow. So if you're German and you're not careful, you might register strasse.de thinking you have the street name, but someone else could totally snag strasse.de. That's exactly the potential issue. It makes you realize how precise these rules have to be and how they can impact users directly. Yeah, definitely. And DD is also adapting to the EU's NIS2 directive in 2025, which is adding yet another layer of regulatory complexity. Always more layers. Okay, what about something like emoji domains? I've heard those are out there. That sounds kind of wild. Yes, emoji domains. They are a fascinating edge case. Most emojis are actually disallowed under IATF standards for generic TLDs like .com. Why is that? Well, they just don't fit the traditional character sets approved for domain names, stability concerns, security risks, etc. But some country code TLDs, CCTLDs, like WS for Samoa, they explicitly support emoji domains. You can actually register something like T-shot, WS. Seriously, a smiley face domain? Seriously. They use it as a marketing tool. And this perfectly highlights that what is technically non-compliant with global standards can still be functionally valid depending on the specific TLD's policy. So it's like local rules trumping global standards sometimes. In certain cases, yes. It's a real Wild West in some corners of the domain world. Okay, speaking of CCTLDs, AI has become incredibly popular recently. What's its story with IDNs given all this complexity? Right, the AIECCTLD for Anguilla, which is actually an English-speaking British overseas territory, fun fact, it has surged because of the AI association. Makes sense. Historically, it was only its registry. The operator changed hands in January 2025. And as of today, August 19, 2025, the information you get from registrars is, well, it's conflicting. How so? Some say IDNs are not supported, others say supported. So, while the technical capability for IDNs might be active now, consistent implementation across all the places you'd go to buy a domain, that isn't guaranteed yet. So registering something like AI in Japanese, unlikely to be broadly supported or work reliably everywhere at this exact moment. The consistency just isn't there yet. This all sounds incredibly complex, especially with different standards and policies floating around. I remember hearing about different browsers handling domains differently at one point. Was that part of this? Like a fractured standard? It absolutely was. There was this historical schism between IDNA 2003 and IDNA 2008, the two versions of the standard. Okay. And they introduced critical incompatibilities. Some domain names could resolve to different puny code labels depending on which standard your software or browser used. Wait, so you type the same domain? Yeah, imagine you tell a friend, go to example.com, but depending on their browser, they could literally end up on completely different websites. Oh, wow. That's chaos. It really was. That's the kind of confusion the IDNA split caused. Now, to bridge this, something called UTS number 46 was developed for compatibility. Okay, a fix. Sort of a patch, yeah. But for a significant period, different web browsers, like Chrome and Firefox, actually adopted different compatibility modes, which led to that exact scenario. Yeah, right. Typing the same domain name into two different browsers could lead you to two entirely different destinations. That sounds like a nightmare scenario for users. A fragmented internet experience. Totally. It was like speaking two dialects of the same language, but they led to different places. And that kind of confusion, it isn't just annoying, is it? It opens the door to something far more insidious. Exactly. Which leads us perfectly, I think, to the single most significant security threat posed by IDNs, the homograph attack. And trust me, this is where it gets truly unsettling. The homograph attack, yeah, it's a classic phishing technique. It exploits homoglyphs. Homoglyphs? Characters that look identical or very nearly identical to the human eye, but are actually different characters to the computer. For example, an attacker can craft apple.com using the Cyrillic instead of the light and I. To you looking at it, it seems perfectly legitimate. It visually impersonates the real apple.com. You literally can't tell the difference just by looking. That's unnerving, this idea of something looking one way but being another. It really is. So how do these homograph attacks actually manifest themselves? Are there different categories of them? Yeah, they show up in a few forms. You've got your obvious cross-script homographs, like that Cyrillic also swapping in for a Latin A, that's the classic one. But then it gets trickier. You have mixed script confusable, like maybe scopetech.com, where they sneak in a Greek tau that looks a bit like a Latin T and makes it visually fuzzy. Even if it might be technically allowed by some TLD rules. So it doesn't have to be a perfect look-alike. No, just confusing enough. And of course, you still have the old-school ASCII-only confusable, like G00glay.com using zeros instead of O's. That's not an IDN issue, but it's the same principle of visual deception. So are certain scenarios higher risk than others, or is it just a free-for-all for attackers? Definitely higher risk scenarios. Single-character domains, for example, are particularly problematic. Why? They just lack linguistic context. It's easier to misinterpret them or create a convincing fake. And certain scripts like Cyrillic, Greek and Armenian are more frequently exploited. Because they look like Latin letters. Exactly. They have many letters that look visually similar to Latin characters, providing a rich pool for homograph attacks. And this is precisely why registries like VeriSign have such strict script mixing prohibitions within a single label. Ah, it connects back. Right, it's a direct response to preventing these high-risk homograph attacks at the source. It really highlights the importance of understanding the intent behind the rules, not just the letter of the law. Okay. Given this immense complexity, the technical rules, the governance layers, the security threats, it makes perfect sense that AI is starting to play a significant role here. It absolutely is. This feels like a whole new frontier for trustworthy AI. It really is. AI is actively being integrated into the commercial domain industry already for tasks like AI-powered domain generation, brainstorming new domain names. Yep. Major providers like Ionos already offer these kinds of services. Okay. And this growing application of AI has led to the development of novel evaluation frameworks, like the AI Domain Polyglot Benchmark or AIDPB. AIDPB. Okay, what's that about? It's specifically designed to test an AI's ability to navigate this incredibly messy, constantly evolving, and often politically negotiated system of domain rules. So the AIDPB isn't just about like rote memorization of rules then. What specific capabilities is it really designed to push AI towards? That's the key difference, yeah. It's not just memorization, it's about applying those rules with what the creators call synthetic judgment. Synthetic judgment. Interesting term. Isn't it? The AIDPB evaluates an AI's capacity to do things like judge whether a domain name is actually registrable considering different scripts and different TLDs. Okay. Convert seamlessly between those human-readable U labels and the machine-readable labels. The puny code stuff. Right. And crucially, Distinguish between the official TLD registry policies and the often more restrictive limits you might find in an individual registrar's user interface. Wait, so a domain could be technically allowed by the main registry? Yes. But the website where I go to buy it might still block me? Exactly, right? The registrar might have its own stricter checks or simply hasn't updated its UI to handle certain complex cases. The AI needs to know that distinction. Wow. Okay, what else? It also tests the AI's ability to propose compliant alternatives if your first choice isn't valid, to flag risks like those confusable we talked about or point out caveats with emoji domains. And even understand nuances like hyphen placement rules. Remember, no hyphens at the start or end and the double -x thing. And yes, applying those complex BD rules for Arabic and Hebrew we touched on earlier. It's comprehensive. That is a really comprehensive set of challenges. I bet the benchmark includes some real trap scenarios to truly test an AI's understanding, not just pattern matching. Oh, absolutely. The benchmark includes specific trap scenarios designed to test deep understanding beyond mere memorization. Like what? Give us an example. Okay, so S.DE, that tests IDNA versioning, specifically how the German character is handled under IDNA 2008 by D. Right, the separate character thing. Exactly. Then S.com, that tests the intra-label script mixing rules, mixing within the same label, which sign usually forbids. Okay. But then SS.com, that tests interlabel rules, putting the Han character in a separate label like a subdomain, that might actually be allowed even if mixing within S isn't. The AI needs to know the difference. Ah, the dot makes all the difference. It can, yes. Then there's S.com using a Cyrillic S instead of a Latin S that tests security acumen recognizing the homograph risk. The visual similarity. Right. In SS, S tests the allowance of non-standard emojis by specific TLDs like pushing the AI to understand exceptions to the general rules. This all clearly ties back to the imperative for trustworthy AI, doesn't it? Particularly given that the DNS is, its critical infrastructure. Yes, absolutely critical. The DNS is a foundational piece of global infrastructure, deeply intertwined with commerce, identity, security, everything online basically. Some mistakes are costly. Hugely. Flawed AI advice in this area could lead to significant financial loss for businesses, serious brand damage or severe security vulnerabilities for users. This benchmark, the AIDPB, it serves as a kind of microcosm for testing AI reliability in these high-stakes environments. It really demands what's being called a human-centric AI or HCI approach. HCI? Yeah, human-centric AI. Meaning the AI shouldn't just give you a simple yes or no answer, it should provide nuanced multi-part responses that really augment human decision-making rather than just trying to automate it away entirely. So it's not enough for the AI to just be technically correct based on the rules. It needs to understand why the rules exist and what the implications are. Precisely. A truly safety-aware AI needs to understand the intent behind the rules. It's not enough to just state that, say, the Cyrillic is visually confusable with the Latin A. A genuinely aligned AI should be able to explain why a domain like PayPal.com with a Cyrillic is likely rejected because of script missing rules, for example, and that those rules exist to minimize consumer confusion, prevent cyber squatting and thwart phishing attacks. So it's connecting the rule to the reason. Exactly. It demonstrates understanding the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law. The goal here is to avoid what some researchers call safety washing. Safety washing? Yeah, where an AI appears safer simply because its general capabilities have improved, but not because it has true alignment with underlying safety principles or human values. It might get the answer right more often, but not necessarily for the right reasons or with the right context. That's a subtle but really important distinction. Okay, so what does this all mean for us, the listeners in our digital world? What are the practical applications of this kind of polyglot AI capability beyond just theory? Well, it has some significant practical applications that could genuinely reshape how we manage the Internet's naming system. For instance, think about policy simulation. How would that work? Before new policies are even ratified by ICANN or a registry, an AI could potentially process millions, maybe billions of hypothetical domain registrations based on the proposed rules. It could find loopholes or predict unintended consequences at a scale that's just impossible for humans to do manually. That's amazing, like stress testing policies before they go live. And what about for cybersecurity? You've highlighted that as a major concern throughout. A massive potential impact there. Enhanced DNS abuse mitigation is huge. Right now, the average time it takes to actually mitigate reported DNS abuse, like a phishing site, using a tricky domain can be up to 8 days. 8 days. That's a long time for a scam site to be active. It's far too long, leaves users vulnerable. A safety-aligned AI, trained on these complex rules and risks, could potentially flag suspicious registrations at the moment of creation. Proactively. Yes, proactively. Providing detailed policy-backed reports like warning, this domain registration appears to be a high-risk homograph of a major financial institution and violates TLD's script mixing policy X. This could dramatically shorten response times and protect consumers much more effectively. That would be a game-changer for online safety. Okay. Now for anyone listening who might be thinking of venturing into international domain names for their business or project, you mentioned something really important earlier, the distinction between a registry and a registrar. Yes. It seems like a subtle point, but it sounds crucial here. It really is crucial to understand. The registry, like sign for .com, D for .de, is the wholesale operator. They manage the entire TLD. They set the overarching policies, the main rules. Okay, the top level. Right. The registrar, on the other hand, is the retail company that sells domains directly to you, the end user, GoDaddy, Namecheap, Google Domains, Dyna. Companies like that. And as we mentioned, a registrar's user interface, their website where you try to register the name, might prevent you from registering a domain that the main registry technically permits. Why would they do that? Could be their own internal checks. Maybe their system isn't updated for certain complex IDNs. Maybe it's a business decision, maybe their interface just blocks things that finds potentially confusing. The point is, what the registrar lets you do isn't always the same as what the registry allows. So if you're specifically looking to register IDNs, especially complex ones, what should you look for in a registrar? Are some better than others? Definitely. You should look for registrars with really robust Unicode support across their platform. Look for explicit support for different language tags if that's relevant, and check if they have clear published IDN policies. Any recommendations? Well, specialists like Dynadot and 101 Domain are often recommended in the industry for handling complex IDNs. They tend to be better equipped to manage non-standard characters and often provide more knowledgeable support for these specific issues compared to some larger, more general-purpose registrars. Good to know. Ultimately, understanding these nuances, registry versus registrar, specific TLD rules, potential pitfalls like homographs, it's vital for managing your own domain portfolio effectively. Whether you track things in a simple spreadsheet or use advanced AI-enhanced tools that are starting to emerge to help track expirations, manage renewals and even assess domain value, this knowledge really helps you navigate the complexities and protect your online identity in this increasingly globalized digital world. This has been an absolutely incredible deep dive. We've really gone from just, clicking a link or typing a URL to uncovering this whole hidden world beneath. We've journeyed from that seemingly simple act to uncovering the complex interplay of technical standards like IDNA, global governance from ICANN, the push for linguistic diversity, and those critical cybersecurity threats like homograph attacks that define the internet's naming system. Yeah, it's a lot more layered than most people think. Totally. We've seen how IDNs are both this amazing bridge to a truly multilingual web, but also a kind of battleground for digital security, and how this AI domain polyglot benchmark is really pushing AI to develop that synthetic judgment needed to navigate this high-stakes environment. And you know, this deep dive into IDNs and the AIDPB, it reveals something pretty profound, I think. That the digital infrastructure we rely on every single day is far more intricate and actually more human-centric than most of us realize. How so, human-centric? Well, all these rules, all these complexities, they ultimately arise from trying to balance technical constraints with human needs, the need for different languages, the need for security, the need to prevent confusion, and the challenges of building AI that could reliably navigate this polyglot gauntlet, as the benchmark creators call it. It's really a microcosm for the broader challenge we face everywhere. You mean developing trustworthy AI in general? Exactly, developing trustworthy, responsible, and genuinely human-aligned AI in any complex regulated field, whether it's finance, law, medicine, or other critical infrastructure. It's a powerful reminder, I think, that even the most technical problems we face online are ultimately about protecting human needs and human values. That's a great point to end on. It brings it back to the human element behind all this tech. So, thinking about all this complexity we've unpacked today, what new complexities did you discover today about something you thought was simple?